So I think we will make a prompt start, given that we have an incredibly packed and fantastic day ahead of us. I would just like to say and extend a warm welcome to all our presenters, our panelists, and our attendees who have come here from very far away digitally, as well as very near home in the UK. My name is Miriam Snellgrove. I am a research fellow on the Bridge and Mind Sport for All project, and I will be chairing this session. So there's some conference advice for you, which I recommend you read through before we get going, but I think a lot of you have seen that already. So I think this session is about the digital pandemic, the COVID, the world that we're living in now. And I think it's obvious to say that the world, and the bridge world as part of that, has had to massively change due to the pandemic. I think 16 months ago, it would have been impossible to predict the ways in which our lives and our everyday lives have been disrupted through the pandemic. Language and practices have changed, with the wearing of face masks becoming compulsory in most countries, phrases such as social distancing and lockdown becoming part of our new normal, as well as restrictions on who we can meet, when we can meet them, where and for how long. Risk, illness and death have become part of our daily news routine. And within this pandemic world, Bridge has changed and developed, with new platforms being developed, Real Bridge, for example, and older platforms like BBO becoming an ever-increasing central part of the ways in which Bridge players, teachers and competitors can engage with and play with Bridge. For some, the pandemic has been a site of continuous learning, teaching and connecting with the Bridge world as an important and crucial leisure activity. For others, the pandemic has meant a loss of community and connection that the digital world cannot fully compensate for. The panel today is going to explore and discuss the various ways that the pandemic has shaped and changed Bridge and the local, national and international responses that have come about as a result of it. I'd like to draw your attention before we move on to some of the fantastic pre-records that we have had for this conference. They are well worth a listen, and they inform and guide many of the discussions that will be happening here on this session. But without any further ado, I would like to ask our first presenter, Kevin Judge.
Miriam, sorry,
yes.
There's a couple of polls first.
Oh, sorry, yes, I forgot the polls, and my apologies. I'm rushing ahead. So there's a couple of polls that we'd like you to fill in. First of all, they should be appearing on your screen, so please fill them out as much as you can.
And they might also appear in chat if somebody can't see them.
Okay, so can you see, please do fill out the polls as much as you can, because this will also be part of the kind of discussions we're having about whether online Bridge is real Bridge, how and what ways it's different. So please do fill out the polls. Thank you.
I put a second one up now.
Fantastic.
We'll continue to play online, face to face, when Bridge fully returns.
Thank you for taking them out and filling them out. Thanks. They might appear in chat for those of you who can't see it, or they appear on your screen.
And unfortunately, some might not get them, depending on their browser.
But don't worry about it too much. Either way, it's really a flavour to understand how people view and are engaging with the online and digital and Bridge during the pandemic and lockdowns and beyond.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
No worries. So as you can see, people are, that's interesting. Most of you would like to continue with a mixture of face-to-face and online, which is fascinating, given we had a discussion yesterday in our keynote where he was suggesting that everything should be online and digital. So this is hopefully going to be the start of some of the very exciting conversations and discussions we'll be having today. But I would now like to hand over to Kevin judge from the University of Stirling who is going to be presenting on some of his research from his PhD. So if I could invite Kevin to start presenting. Thank you. You have 10 minutes, Kevin, and then 15 minutes for Q&A.
5 minutes for Q&A, Miriam.
Oh, sorry. Already starting so well.
It's 15 minutes in total, so.
Hi there, can you see that okay?
Yes, wonderful, Kevin. Thank you.
Right, great stuff. Thanks. Thanks, Miriam. Thanks. Okay, so before I begin, I would like to thank the conference team for the hard work and efforts. More importantly, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the bridge unions and the funders and everyone who's contributed to the PhD project during these very difficult times. Their contributions and time have been invaluable and greatly appreciated. Okay, so briefly, I'm going to talk about the data collection, discuss social capital, outline the focus of this presentation through James Coleman's work, and share some findings through stability. The presentation represents part of a larger PhD study into the benefits, barriers and motivations experienced by bridge players. As a subsection of the wider project, the dataset was collected by conducting semi-structured interviews online, by telephone, and on 2 occasions by email. Due to the pandemic, recruitment for the project was understandably a challenge and therefore required some adaptation. Nevertheless, I managed to interview a total of participants from across England and Scotland, and they were grouped into younger, later life and returning players and their teachers. And during the interview process, the adaptations, transcription and familiarisation with the data, the recurring theme of individual pursuit and group participation became evident. This merited further exploration with a lens of social capital offering a way to do this. So historically, ideas of social capital the work of Pierre Bourdieu and Robert Putnam. For Bourdieu, issues of social capital were about reproduction of inequality in society due to lack of access to resources. These experiences became patterned and a source of class conflict, while Putnam famously produced ideas of bonding and bridging for group inclusion and interactions to prosper. And there are explicit examples of this within the data collected for this project, but we need to remember that attitudes and beliefs can be certain influences in life. So, for example, a class-based experience was shared by one participant saying that if they had told their father that they were going to play bridge, he would have replied by saying, "You're up your own arse." This suggests his view of bridge is for a particular group to the exclusion of others. Alternatively, an early introduction into the game of bridge appears to be an extremely common occurrence. And the relationships of that introduction into bridge could be or bridging activity between generations or different social networks. The focus for today, however, is what Grudecki describes as the mechanisms for creating social capital. I feel that this is a balance between cooperation and self-interest, and it is an approach based on the influential work of James Coleman. So the relevance of Coleman's work on social capital and to the broader PhD project is his development in increasing attainment of education for those from diverse backgrounds. So he goes about this by using 3 internal factors. Coleman goes about this with 3 internal factors, and that is closure of social structure, ideology, and stability. So firstly, closure of social structure encourages a reciprocity in customs or norms. And this is important as it allows for an increased efficiency in action and trustworthiness. A good example of this would be the agreement of a competitor in opposition. This means that the game can be played consistently and reliable between a range of partners and opponents. In a more practical example, during the interviews with teachers, of bridge, they were keen to stress that it is extremely important and beneficial to be more inclusive with a range of bridge playing abilities as representatives at a committee level. Secondly, ideology, and this is described as a demand upon an individual that they act and behave or someone else other than themselves. It is perhaps easier to explain this as too much self-dependence or self-interest can be destructive for social capital. Referring to the teachers interviewed again, some noticed a drop in standards and how this will ultimately impact on the game, and it prompted them to develop new ideas and ways of teaching. Others gave recollections of the closeness of international players from a previous time and the importance of having approachable role models in the game. Coleman seeks integration from individuals. However, too much competitiveness might be detrimental. This leads us to a third and final factor for consideration, and that is stability. And this is about getting balance between the structure and the individual. Should individuals be able to move too freely within a structure, then it might suggest that the ideology is too strained or varied, and this will impact on the trust built through reciprocity. Again, it's also important to recognise it. Can foster positive and negative outcomes for group interactions and relationships that might be extremely supportive or harmful to others. So where do we go for this? The main focus of the discussion then is the importance of stability for producing social capital, with the question being how is stability fostered in bridge, how is balance found by individuals, and how do they negotiate self-interest and social capital, particularly in times of the pandemic? So the examples and stories from the bridge can nurture players and social capital. As I mentioned previously, there are lots of connections to early experiences of bridge that is aided by someone who is trusted. So this could be a grandmother or a father or a close family friend, and these all represent key motivational factors. However, some personal circumstances, like in a pandemic, can leave an individual feeling disconnected and isolated from certain social interactions where the reassurances of trust are vague. So examples of this could be pre-retirement, loss of a loved one, or physical deterioration. But it could also mean the newness of living in a foreign country, the leap between levels in education, or an untried activity by a person who knows that they like. Bridge can represent an alternative and safer opportunity to build trust and act upon reciprocity by providing structure through gameplay. It's interesting that most participants describe finding their level within the game, so there is a degree of personal responsibility taken here, or a self-limiting process within the social structure to make play happen. So much so that participants would discuss at length how they would learn bridge through external sources and means, like reading books, playing online games and using resources, or meeting up to discuss play over coffee. It's important to note here that bridge is a game that can be solved, and the more skilled the player, the more likely it is that they can solve the puzzle and make less mistakes, most importantly. So, wider commitment to learning bridge will build trust within the game and how it is played, as it becomes a rewarding and then a worthwhile experience. This could be evidenced in the comments that I've put on the slides here by one returning player who described how they would support newer players because it was important to give back to the game and to the club, or the comment by a younger player about how there is a need to create a comfortable setting for play. However, there were experiences shared, that highlighted how self-interest can quick competitive of a game setting, one where mistakes will inevitably lead to winners and losers, and this could refer to subjective interpretations of the ideology that can influence the game, the setting, and the players involved. And it is also likely to impact on the levels of trust within these situations. So to quickly highlight these points, one extreme, some beginners use the term of reserve friendships to describe those that they learn to play alongside. And the other extreme, I interviewed one participant who quite enjoyed having a nickname that referred him to a predatory animal by his opponents. So by applying Coleman's theory to this research, it demonstrates that it's critical to establish stability. However, there remains a tension between individual and group participation. Therefore, if we want to ensure sustainability in the game, researchers and stakeholders need to reflect on how local bridge clubs, wider community and experiences of play address this tension to foster stability for its players. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to chatting to you more about this research and other things. Thanks. And a wee list of references for you too.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was great. I think your internet, can we give Kevin a big round of applause, even if it's digital or virtual or whatever? That's wonderful. Your internet broke up in between, I think, for some of us, but I think we all got the kind of gist of what was going on. I do have a question for you at the moment from Espen in chat. He is asking whether in our country, your country, is bridge regarded as an activity performed by a certain social group?
Is bridge regarded, sorry, can you
is bridge in your country regarded as an activity performed by a certain social group? I guess it's a class question, Kevin.
I guess it's a class. That was just a kind of a throwaway comment that a participant kind of reflected on. While I don't want to dwell on that too much, there were these comments that come up regularly, well, not regularly, sometimes within research that make you think about kind of motivations and barriers from previous eras and how perceptions are formed around certain leisure activities. And I don't think bridge is alone in experiences of, I guess it's a kind of progression from how does a new player get in, how do you become a bit of an amateur, how do you become much more of an elite player. Running clubs, football clubs, everything could similarly find a reflection of this.
So that's it might be, but it might not be question, or it's complicated.
Well, it might be. I think it goes back to ideas of how serious you take a leisure activity, who gets included in a leisure activity, what are the kind of behind the scenes of leisure activities, who can devote time, who can devote commitment.
No, thank you. That's been fantastic. Thank you very much. We have a question here from Zoe, but who's wanting to know and she's apologising in case you've covered this because your internet did break up in between. But how does the idea of social capital relate to other forms of capital in bridge? For example, economic, cultural. Is this something that you have considered?
Well, not to that certain extent. I'm always kind of puzzled by bridge because there is a low entrance for an economic argument to get into bridge, but as it's related so much to kind of the responsibilities and the commitments you have in wider life, how do you start to close round on a social structure to say that I'm going to I can give time to that activity.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And Kevin, we have a number of other questions that have come into the chat, but as this session is very full, I'm going to have to draw your section and presentation to a close now. But if you would like to go into the chat and see some of the questions there, you could answer them. That would be fantastic. Or engage with them as and when you like. But thank you very much, Kevin, again, for a very
thank you. What a great experience.
An interesting presentation. Thank you. We are now going to move on to our first of two panels. And again, I would invite all our attendees who are here to put questions in the chat, and panel members, where possible, will answer them. This is a very packed session with two panels, as I've already said. So this will mean that we only have one Q&A session before we break up into discussion groups. So yes, questions in chat are essential. But without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panel. And the panel we have here is Nikki Bainbridge, Bridge for Pleasure, Patrick Shields from the Gloucestershire County Bridge Association, Peter Cox from the Australian Bridge Federation. Oh no, it's Tim Anderson. I'm now getting very confused. Is it Tim Anderson or Peter Cox who is talking now? And we have Jan Kamras from the President of the European Bridge League. And I would also like to say that this panel will now discuss what they see as some of the current and future opportunities and challenges of the new Bridge Different. And I would like to invite Nikki to speak.
Okay. Thank you. I hope you can see my slides. Great. I've been running a bridge club for over 10 years now. I started it to provide bridge more for friendly purposes than for competitive purposes. We have no elite players in the club. We have a handful of strongish club players, but most of our members are either in the bottom half of our national grade scheme here in England, or they've not played enough of the right kind of bridge to qualify at all. Before the pandemic hit, we had over 200 members paid up, and we were slow last year, but this year we have over 110 paid up members, and that's been a lot of work to make that happen. When the lockdown hit, at first everything just stopped. We were shattered. I then started producing weekly newsletters initially, because that was the first thing I could do, and that helped keep the club members together and informed and supporting each other. And we're really very much more part of the town fabric, I think, than part of the sort of big bridge world. I then started teaching online to get going again. I've been teaching 20 years now. We then started playing club sessions in social facilities online. We then had our own first private dedicated session on the Bridge Club Live platform, which made me feel we were back in business as a club. In July of 2020, the restrictions relaxed enough to allow you to provide in-person bridge, provided you cut your capacity right down, invested in equipment, got hold of sanitizer, made people wear masks, etc. And between July and October, we offered 27 in-person COVID secure sessions. Very small number of tables, so not really bridge, I think, as far as any sort of tournament competition would be concerned, but good enough for our people and quite popular. We then added in practice and other sessions on real bridge when it came along, which was wonderful. And we've reached a point now where we're probably about a third as active as we were pre-COVID. Big change, we stopped taking cash and checks, and we're not going to in future. We had quite a lot of part-time paid members who helped, or paid people who helped, bookkeeping, admin, stewards, board dealing, TDs, and that's all gone now. It's just down to myself and my husband doing all the work, which is hard. We are down to about 10% of the income that we had, but it's building slowly. Where are our members that we had before COVID? Some are too frail to pay, some have passed on. About 60 are missing. I haven't heard from them. I don't know how they are or what they're doing. About another 50 have indicated they were waiting for in-person bridge to return, or waiting a bit longer for in-person bridge to return. About 40 have played in our COVID secure sessions. About 40 have played in our online sessions, and the overlap between the two is relatively small.
1 minute.
We've learned a lot of new skills, thank you. And I think we will continue to work in different ways, because we now know how to do things that we didn't before. And we've taken to networking. I network with other teachers and I network with other club people. So here to stay. Challenges we've still got is the demographic. You know, our players are visibly a year older when they walk in the room, and we haven't seen them for a year. It's very clear. We still, I think, have a problem getting people from their lessons online or wherever into club sessions. But there's going to be more online bridge, more online teaching, and there are still players, and always will be players, who prefer to play in person because it's part of their social life. And the big challenges are how many are going to return to in-person bridge, how many are going to stay online. It's very dodgy, the numbers, very soft. Whether it's the impact of summer, which normally hits bridge, or whether it's the ongoing uncertainties, is difficult to tell. And where the proportion of players who are going to play in person versus those who play both is going to settle, I don't know, and it's going to be crucial to the future. Thank you. That's it.
Beautifully on time, Nikki. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite, I think there's been some questions for you put in chat, Nikki, so if you wouldn't mind looking at those and possibly answering them. But at the moment, I'd like to invite Patrick Shields to take over from Nikki and give his 5 minutes worth on opportunities and challenges of the new Bridge Different.
Right, now I'm going to talk to you folks about from this from the perspective of a county association, and the county association is the one layer that exists in England between the Bridge Club and the national organisation. I've got to start with what the role is, what the role was of the county association even before the pandemic. I'll describe it. There's more to it than this, but the three most visible aspects of activity within the county associations, I mean, have been teaching, running tournaments, and supporting bridge clubs. And these are the three I want to home in on, because these are the three that get affected by the pandemic. I do want to make the point to start with that in teaching and in running competitions, the county associations are not there to compete with the clubs. They're there to complement the clubs. They're there to fill the gaps that the clubs can't easily fill. The biggest gap that turns up in practice is the difficulty that clubs have in catering for their top players. Now, any bridge player gets the most enjoyment, tends to, out of playing against their peers. And the difficulty for clubs is that if they have a small number of players at the top of the ability level, they haven't got the critical mass to provide them with a good game. So that's really where the county steps in, and why we find that most county activity is biased towards the players of greater ability. Now, how does that change when we hit the pandemic? Well, the big difference that has happened to the county associations is that the gap, the shape and the size of the gap in terms of bridge players' appetite that the county could now start filling, or was needed, that the county now needed to start filling, I mean, has changed. It's not just the players at the top end of the ability range, but players all through the range. Some of them, now some bridge clubs, have been doing very well in providing online bridge games for their members, but the totality of the total availability of bridge games, isn't the same as it was pre-pandemic. So there are gaps there that the county associations, have a chance to step in to fill, and this is where they have actually been active. And the big difference that I've seen in the past 12 months is that the recognition that the gaps that need filled are not just the gaps at the top of the ability level, that there is scope for the county associations to actually provide facilities that are useful for players all the way through the spectrum. And a number of the county associations have been very active in the past 12 months in organising games specifically geared to or even restricted to players of lower ability levels. So that's been the one thing that's more visible than anything else. The other thing that's come through in that time period is that the cost, as it were, the economic cost of playing inter-county events has changed. You no longer have the travel time associated with these events, and that means that it's not just the very top ability players who are the ones who are most hooked on the game, who are willing to put in the hour of driving there and the hour of driving back to have a game. All levels of players have shown an appetite for playing in inter-county games. Now, where do we go in the future? I think the key thing is the fact that online bridge, taking away that burden of travel time, is actually very suitable for county activities, because it makes those county activities much more accessible to people across the county. That's not just in organising games, but actually in organising teaching, because again, some clubs, the smaller ones particularly, have difficulty generating the critical mass they need either for teaching or for running supervised play sessions to keep the teachers going afterwards. And these are things where the county, in a sense, can step in. So as far as I can see, online bridges is here to stay, and even more so for counties than for clubs. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patrick. And again, succinct and perfect to the time. I would recommend checking chat for any questions or comments that come in that are related to you and what you have said. I would now like to invite Peter Cox to give a 5-minute presentation on how he sees the new future opportunities and challenges from his perspective within the Australian Bridge Federation. Peter?
Thank you very much. Yes, look, in Australia, we're in a fairly unique position that as to where we are re-COVID than what you are in the UK, and we can really tell you about a post-COVID experience. Look, we have 36,000 members of the Australian Bridge Federation in Australia. New Zealand has about 14,000. Both Australia and New Zealand have a higher proportion of their population playing bridge than what the UK has playing bridge, for a matter of interest, right? So the online platforms, yes, we had BBO, we had Step Bridge, we had Real Bridge, etc. We closed in March 2020, the same as everybody else, but we recommenced progressively from June onwards. So South Australia, Western Australia, those that were remote away from Sydney and Melbourne, they got going. So they were really only closed for 3 months. New South Wales, where we provide 40% of the players, and Queensland another 20%. We came back on in about September, and about in Victoria came on in December. So everybody's been going for 6 months to 12 months back playing face-to-face bridge and online. So experience so far, which you might be interested in, is my calculation is about 90% of the people have returned to playing. Now, as far as national tournaments are concerned, they were all cancelled from March onwards, right? Both the national and the international ones. We got back to playing a few face-to-face congresses in April, May, again in Tasmania, Adelaide and Perth, places that were well away from the hotspots. Right. We had our Australian National Championships. We're actually meant to be playing next week in Perth, but now they've had to be cancelled, actually for the second time, or postponed for the second time, as New South Wales and now nearly every other state is in lockdown except for one. So the national tournaments have been badly affected by it. On the international scene, we are in Zone 7. There's us in New Zealand. A WBF obligation is that we had to play playoffs. So that was really interesting. We used that. The New Zealanders played from New Zealand. Australians, we played from 7 locations around Australia. We had supervisors in each of those locations to make sure that people weren't cheating. We played open, women's, seniors, mixed and youth. So that was 5 divisions. It went very well. And we've been doing the same thing on congresses, and that was using Real Bridge, and we've been using Real Bridge now. When our congresses get knocked out, we return to playing them online on Real Bridge, so that has worked really well. Each player had to take their own computer, their own headset to wear, right? So, and New Zealand had 2 sites where we had 7. I think the conclusion that we'd come to out of all of this is that online with video and audio combined with on-site supervision can provide a very secure competition. Right? I think just playing on BBO with no cameras and no sound and no supervision, yes, there's a lot of weaknesses there. But online, yes, we think that can work well. My research, I did research of 2,500 players responded to my research in Australia, and it showed a bit similar to yours, that there would be a hybrid in the future. Some people would be playing, most people would be playing in clubs with some online bridge. There'd be a small group playing only online and a small group only playing on face-to-face. But I think what it shows is that clubs can do it. We ran a very successful, we raised $700,000 for our clubs by playing online, which went back to our clubs during a difficult period. So yes, you can run local competitions, but I think the strength is in playing national and international competitions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Peter. Very beautifully succinct. I think there is a couple of questions for you about lockdown and face-to-face play in chat. If you wouldn't mind answering those, that would be great. But I would now like to introduce our final panel speaker, who is Jan Kamras, and the president of the European Bridge League, who will give us 5 minutes on his perspective on the opportunities and challenges that have faced the European Bridge League in these times. Over to you, Jan.
Thank you very much, Miriam and Sam and everybody. Good day to you. The obvious reasons for why our activities have been affected are international travel and large gathering restrictions. And what we are doing basically is, for external activities, we run championships, 3 per year. We run courses like tournament director courses. We run some seminars for our NBO officials. And internally, of course, we have meetings, which have normally been held face-to-face. Now, during these times, of course, we couldn't do any of these. And I believe that there have been quite a few positive side effects of this, which were, of course, not planned. The internal meetings, to take them first, normally we had 2 or 3 executive committee meetings per year. Now we have had, I think, something like 10 executive committee meetings on Zoom in our case, but of course you can use whichever facility you want. So it has been actually a much more inclusive and effective running of our affairs. As far as TD courses are concerned, we have considered that for the future we might do part of a course online first, an introductory part, and then have only 1 or 2 days live at some common place. And for seminars for NBOs, we could also imagine, maybe in addition to having a physical one every second year, which is what we do presently, maybe in the other years, every second year, we can do an online one, so we can get even more NBO inputs in totality. So I believe that from that point of view, there are some positive aspects which will continue for the future. As far as championships is concerned, here, when I'm limiting myself to the international ones, zonal and world championships, I haven't, during these past 1.5 years, I haven't had one single message asking us to play our championships online instead of live. But I've had dozens of calls, SMSs, emails asking me, please don't get us away from face-to-face bridge. We really like to play with cards. We want to meet. It's part of our enjoyment in playing competitive high-level bridge. So I see the very few events that we are in charge of, I believe, will stay face-to-face with cards, but that doesn't preclude us from also arranging events online quite separately. But we also don't want to compete with the NBOs and other organizations, because what we see now, the calendar is very, very tight online. And, if we start competing too much, we were taking away income opportunities from NBOs and others. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions when they come.
Wonderfully succinct, Jan. That is beautiful. Thank you very much. And I'd like to if we could all give a big round of applause for our first group of panel members, who have also, I think, been busy answering your questions in chat. There will be a Q&A at the end of the second panel, but we do have another panel right now. So without further ado, I'd like to press on to the new panel. And these panelists are going to have already done pre-records. So again, for those of you who have not seen their pre-records, I recommend watching their pre-records. And they are going to answer and speak for only a very short time. But in this panel, we have Christina Ballinger, who's the Secretary of Heritage Coast Bridge Club in Suffolk and BAMS's very own Impact Officer. We have Espen Gisvold from Manchester County Bridge Association in England. We have Kath Fox from the Essex Contract Bridge Association, also in England. and we have Tim Anderson, Membership Officer for the English Bridge Union. And they are going to speak about the most pressing issues of the new Bridge Different from their perspective. And they will start, first of all, Christina will speak, then we will hear from Espen, then Kath, and finally Tim. You're muted, Christina.
Thank you. From the point of view of a small club in East Anglia, Heritage Coast Bridge Club, we have identified 3 key issues. Do we have now a club within a club? Are the online players somehow different to the face-to-face players? We have an issue around the standard of play, because those of us who've been playing online bridge in a concentrated fashion for the past year, we've had ample opportunity to improve, to analyse our hands and our play, because that's what online platforms offer us. And those who are playing face-to-face, perhaps they were the more social, friendly, uncompetitive types. So as well as the club within the club, we now have this issue about a difference of standards between members in the club. And those factors together, I think, are possibly widening the gap between the social players and the serious players, which is a dichotomy and a divide that we've discussed at previous sessions. So those for me are 3 interrelated issues relating to potentially a widening gap between members of the same club. Thank you. Over to you, Espen.
Okay, first a little caveat. A professor once gave a prediction. It was brilliant and with great conviction. The future it came, his predictions in shame, he now has to face its rejection. So now this is my predictions. 1, the future of bridge is digital, because it's inclusive. 2, it's green, no travel, no heating of venues. And 3, it's comfortable. The future of bridge is hybrid. That means that people can be online playing in the same tournament as people that's gone to the club. And that is because as humans, we are tribal. We like to be in our little group. We are also sociable. We like to meet people. And also to make it hybrid, will also make it inclusive so that we can have the best of both worlds. So with that, over to Kath.
Hi. I think if we go back to last March, we thought maybe COVID was going to be accelerating the demise of bridge. But instead, we've kind of got an exciting time, because I think for the first time ever, we've got online platforms who are really investing in the game and making the game better. So that's quite exciting. We've also got players. I mean, a year, before COVID, or BC, as some people call it, before COVID, lots of people had never played online. And now you've got probably somewhere between 50 and 90% of bridge players all playing online, as well as playing face-to-face. So that opens up a whole new market for bridge, where people want to play who are geographically distanced, or want to play when they can't go out to a club. So I think it's a really exciting time where we've got a chance to make bridge more popular again. And over to Tim.
Hello. So what happens to bridge now? We've had a demographic challenge for a while, and we still have that. Now we've also suffered lockdown, and I don't want to understate how tough this has been and continues to be. But I was struck by this comment from Joe Jones, the executive director of ACBL, who said that only by realising the potential of online play can we significantly increase awareness and grow the game. I would extend that, though. It's not just online play, but technology that can help us. And I know I'm sounding a bit like an echo of the previous speakers. That's what happens when you speak forth. That can help us. And one bright spot of the lockdown is that it did provoke an amazing uptick in the energy and investment in bridge technology and online bridge, and also push bridge players into being more open to its use. The question now, and it is a big one and a difficult one, is how do we build on that as we both return to face-to-face bridge and work out how to make best use of the new resources we've gained? Specifically in our own club, and I did talk about this in the video which is online, we have seen advantages in teaching and migrating new players into club sessions. One of the biggest problems in growing club membership. We're determined not to lose those advantages and also to look for others as we move forward.
Thank you very much. You've all been absolutely wonderfully, beautifully succinct. I would now like to invite our two panels to come together, and we are going to have now 10 minutes to be able to have a sort of Q&A across the different themes and discussions that you've all raised in various ways. I think what we're hearing from the different presentations, and I'm not trying to simplify things too drastically here, is that there is a great engagement and joy for some in the move online and the argument put forward by Espen, the prediction that the future of bridge is digital, and then others arguing that they need to be a bit face-to-face. I was wondering how you see this tension between the digital and the face-to-face going forward as a panel. Anybody feel free to chip in.
Can I just tell you one experience from Australia?
Yes,
and
please,
that
Peter.
is that we peaked online back in May last year, right? So once clubs started coming back, people returned to the clubs and their use of online has reduced, and it's reduced by about 80% at club level. So that is a significant factor. However, in Sydney, for example, we've just gone into a lockdown, and our online games that were going before and had dropped back to about 10 or 12 tables are now up to 26 tables a time. So the market's very reactive to the situation.
So your argument is essentially actually, depending on whether you're in lockdown or not, online bridge will flourish or a return to face-to-face will just come back. You had something similar, didn't you, Nikki, when things opened up, that people were willing to come back?
Yes, people are willing to come back. They were willing to come back last year. They're willing to come back this year. Many of them don't play online and don't want to play online. And I've never had any trouble respecting that choice and being willing to provide for them as a constituency. And I think, you know, personally, I think it would be letting them down not to give them the chance. I mean, interestingly, one of the things that puzzled me, and it's puzzled me before, is some of the people who were older and more frail were the people who came, even when, you know, the pandemic created a lot of uncertainty. People's attitude to risk is very varied, you know, and it's not necessarily linked to age, I've discovered, I think.
Brilliant. Any other comments that people want to make about ideas around risk and health amongst their constituent bridge players?
Well, maybe indirectly the health aspect. I mean, if we are trying to market as organizations, as national or international organizations, we're trying to get support from different government entities, etc., or from schools, educational administrators. You know, if we come with a purely digital game, how can we say that this helps the older people solve their problems of isolation and etc., etc.? It's part of, for that one at least, we need to market it as a face-to-face game. And I think at the school level, there is a lot of discussion scientifically about how good it is that the kids are spending all this time in front of screens all the time. And now we want to take them away, even from the face-to-face bridge, and put them in front of screens also on their free time. You know, I think we have to be a little bit careful and market our game / sport maybe in different ways to different audiences.
Thank you, Jan. Espen, you wanted to come in there. You're muted.
Yes, now I'm back. If you go back to the 1960s, I don't know how many of the bridge players at that point said that the only way to play bridge was rubber bridge. Then it was quite a few. I don't see many rubber bridge clubs around these days. So I think that things will change. And I look at my own experience over the last 15 months. I now know a lot of people a lot better than I would have known if I was just going to play in the club for another 5 years. So I don't think that playing online necessarily is antisocial. I think I can be very sociable, and I think it can be very inclusive. If I'm a 15-year-old boy or girl or whatever, there's not much street cred going down to the church hall to play with some OAPs at night, but to play online is absolutely fine. So we have to understand the different demographics of different people, and also that technology changes a lot. Okay.
Thank you. I think Tim wanted to come in there. Tim, you have your hand up.
Yes, I was just thinking about the danger of making assumptions. My assumption had always been that face-to-face bridge is the most fantastic experience and one that I've missed dreadfully during our lockdown. So there isn't any question in my mind that we want to abandon that. But I haven't said that explicitly because it seems to me it doesn't really need saying. I think what does need saying is that we need to recognise that online has got good things about it as well, many of which have been made explicit. So we do want to do both. We certainly it's never been anywhere close to our minds to try and discourage people from playing face-to-face. Far from it. That is a fantastic thing to do, and I personally can't wait to get back to it. But we need to make the best of where we are, and we need to learn how to use technology in some of the new ways that we've learned to advantage. Just wanted to say that, really.
Thank you very much. Patrick, you want to come in on that?
It's a little bit of an echo of what Tim said there, but there are definitely positive advantages to online and face-to-face in different cases. You can build, and it's very important to build some sense of community, and that's something you can do on face-to-face that's very, very difficult to do online. So we have to recognise that we need face-to-face because of that, but at the same time there's so many times online is much more convenient. So we need it for that. What we have to do is somehow maintain not two communities there, but one community, and somehow keep the game together, while recognising the fact that both aspects have strengths.
Thank you. I think that's been brilliant. But we've had a number of questions from people wanting to have a clearer explanation about how a hybrid would work, because you've both flagged up the online works. There are benefits to the online. There are benefits to face-to-face. So now there's a lot of conversation and chat about this desire of having a hybrid. Could you elaborate on how you see the hybrid going forward? Yes. I mean, Patrick, are you still got your hand up from last time, or?
No, that's from last time, sorry.
Okay, Espen, would you like to start us off?
No, first of all, you have hybrids in two ways. First of all, that you will have both online and you will have face-to-face. They will both coexist. But I can visualize a platform where because I can't go to the club that night, I can still join in, so that my seat at the club is a tablet. So whenever people come to that table, they pick up that tablet and they play against me. So I take part in the game in the club while I'm sitting at home. And so that you have a merger of those two forms of play. And I think that is a very, very viable proposition. And I think that is something that the developers are thinking about.
I hear you, but I know, yes, Peter, maybe come in. I was also going to call on Nikki, because I know that combining those two forms of technology, depending on your size of club, can be quite challenging. So I was wondering, Peter first, and then maybe Nikki would have some thoughts on that.
No, Nikki, you handle that point. If you're going to do that point, I can raise a different point.
Okay. At the moment, we are what I would describe as a hybrid club. We're running both face-to-face sessions, and then at separate times we're running online sessions. Mm-hmm. And the online sessions at present are definitely hit harder by the better weather and the more opportunities. There's more loyalty to the face-to-face. For us at the moment, all sessions are quite small, and it seems to me that you need a larger number of tables collectively to run a hybrid session, because I think if you're running it basically as two sections, as we used to do face-to-face, you need a reasonable number of tables in each to combine them for a meaningful result. And I worry that until we got that sort of mass, we would be subject to it raining and nobody turning up face-to-face in the club because they all decide to be online that day, and we've got the club open and costing us money for no good reason. I think it's going to be a good solution for bigger events, though, and I know the EBU's running some in the summer or looking to. But I think for smaller clubs, it might be a while before we've got the mass to do that effectively.
Thank you. Peter or Peter and then Jan.
Okay, so we had this major tournament coming up next week, our National Teams Championship, to be held in Perth. Now, Perth's a few thousand miles away from the east coast of Australia. It's 2 hours behind New South Wales. When only New South Wales was locked out, what we were thinking of doing was having the people, when their turn was to play against New South Wales, they in Perth, they would be playing it on their laptops and their computers against the Sydney people on their computers, but the other teams would be playing each other physically. So that's another way of combining together an event as a hybrid, which I think is a really interesting name for this type of thing.
Thank you. Jan?
Well, I think it depends on what we mean by hybrid. It seems to me that in some discussions, including here, hybrid, the tablets, like on LoveBridge, for example, is considered to be a hybrid. But since this session is about the effects of the pandemic, I never understood how the physical presence and traveling, but playing on tablets, how that would help. I mean, the problem with the pandemic is the traveling and the gatherings. And if you anyway have to travel and gather, you might as well play a normal bridge with cards, because of course we can do it today with full sets of boards and personal bidding boxes, etc., etc. So, you know, it's different type of hybrids that actually we have discussed even in WBF. Could we do a hybrid solution for the World Team Championships? The problem, of course, in a WBF event is the enormous time differences. I mean, you can, I don't have to explain that because it's fairly obvious, but we probably spread over something like 22 or 20 at least different time zones. So the question is, could we find a solution where, you know, we put together different groupings of relatively similar time zones? We could do something online, and then we can qualify for the knockouts with the top 8. They would be gathered, for example, at the physical location to play together. The advantage then being lower costs for all the others, and also that we would be fewer people in the physical gathering. So that could be another type of hybrid. Easier to do in the EBL than in the WBF. Obviously, EBL only has, I believe, 3 time zones.
Brilliant, thank you. I think one other question that I think is kind of underlying here, but not I've been touched on by a few, is this fact that some people have not made a move online at all and are kind of like, where are they? Does any of the panel have any thoughts about where these missing bridge players are?
I think the thing you've got to face is not everybody's going to come back, right? There is certainly an older group who just won't face the technology. We offered free lessons to them. We'd go to their home and help teach them how to use it. And, you know, once the older people do it, they then become addicted. They love it. But it's just getting over that first step. In Australia, we probably only had 30 to 35% playing online, where in the UK, I think you're claiming over 50%, which makes sense with how long you've been locked out for.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on reluctance to move online, not moving online?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think everyone wants to play online, and I don't see why they should. It's a different. The game does have different qualities online, and if someone likes face-to-face bridge and doesn't like online bridge, that's entirely a matter for them. It's be silly of us to try and, you know, persuade people who don't want to be persuaded. That said, it has been important during lockdown to try and get as many people as possible online who would enjoy it with the right guidance. And that, for me, has been proven time and again that people struggle to get started, but once they get going online, they've really enjoyed it. So it's been very worthwhile.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much also, panel, for the debates and discussion that we've had here. A lot of the things that have been raised, we are going to talk about in the discussion group shortly. But now I would like to briefly round up this section before we move into the next session. those of you on the panel, you may know, some of you may have participated, but Sam Punch and I ran a Bridging COVID project, and I would just like to give some brief insights into that project that tap into some of the things that you have all been mentioning here. So we ran a lockdown diary project, and starting in the first lockdown and finishing in December 2020. And some of the key things that were flagged up were the issues around time, age, the digital, geography, and social. And what was highlighted for us in our data, and I encourage you to watch our pre-records, is that there was a lot of time spent learning, educating, and playing, something this panel has also mentioned, that initially reluctance to get online did not mean that once you were online, you didn't love it. And people have been saying they've been playing more than ever, but also people have been equally saying they've been playing less than before. But time is frequently mentioned as a key factor throughout various lockdowns and beyond. Age is a key issue. The average age of our participants in this study were 70 plus, and I think Tim and Espen have mentioned in their pre-records that we are what they call an old lot. So often bridge players tend to be older than the median populations of various countries that they are in, and that was reflected very much for us in the kinds of data and accounts that we were receiving. And then equally the digital, something this panel has touched on in great detail, is the ways in which there is either a loving or a loathing, but at the same time there's also a gradual move to and acclimatizing of the digital. And that is also goes hand in hand with an improvement in the digital platforms that also make online bridge play so much easier. And then fourthly, geography, that what has been one of the most fantastic things about the online move is that people have been able to connect with players, partners, that they hadn't normally or had fallen out of touch with before, and could now play with people across the world regardless of location. Something Christina touched on, and Nikki as well, in that they now have club members from out with their geographical location. So what does that mean for the future of clubs? And again, I'm harking back to Marty's comment yesterday in his keynote, where he thought that the NBOs and IBOs would be irrelevant because the future is digital, something Espen also predicted. So we will have to wait and see what happens. I think the panel discussion here has made that picture somewhat more complex. And finally, the social, that Bridge is an important social hub, and that for some people, they argued that there was more social interaction online. I think Espen flagged that up. Some people felt that they could connect with people online in easier, less hostile environments than a club, and they found the online more friendly. And for others, it was conversely the opposite. The online was hostile and antagonizing, and the club was a space where they felt comfortable and at home. So what we often see here in this COVID world and with this COVID data is one of divisions between loving and loathing, being online or offline, feeling that you're part of it or not. So there is, and this I think is slightly more complicated than necessarily when we set it up as a binary. And so I do encourage you also to come and see, big plug here, shameless plug, my presentation tomorrow, which will be discussing age and isolation and loneliness and destabilizing some of those ideas around the binaries between them. But now we are going to move into the latter part of this day, and that is going to be panel discussions, where attendees and panel presenters will be going into 6 different groups to discuss some of the 6 key challenges and issues that are facing Bridge globally, nationally, and locally. You will be randomly assigned to your group. I'm afraid that's just the way it is with the technology, but we hope that you will have a live.
Still alive. But the experience in Australia was the clubs that provided online, the ones that provided it well, did well. Some of our big clubs didn't provide online, and one in particular I can think of is just about being put out of business, and it was a very strong, powerful club because it didn't provide a service during that period.
Hello, are we all back? Has everyone successfully managed the digital transition? So huge round of applause to Sam for that.
Well, sorry, I think we did lose a couple of bodies, I'm afraid.
Well, it's
casualties.
That's okay, but most of us are back, and it all seemed to go very seamlessly from my end. So we are now into sort of the last sort of half an hour of this panel discussion, and we're going to having some feedback and discussion from each of the discussion groups. And I hope each and every one of those discussion groups has had and appointed a spokesperson who's hopefully probably one of the panelists. So we had a very interesting and lively, interesting discussion in our session. So can I call on Espen to give a few points of what he thought the key things were that he heard from our group? You're muted, Espen.
And I know. Could you put up the questions so they are up visible?
Yeah, I can share our screen.
Because to question 1, the main points, and was made quite well from Gail, is that good clubs have embraced the online, and they have and they will improve. Well, clubs that have not taken to online seem to be struggling a lot. From her experience, Real Bridge had really created a lot of real friendships, and people have met up afterwards and become real proper friends. So online does create friendships and social coherence. Secondly, for the clubs, communication is of essence. Adam Weisberg made the point that hybrid, that will mainly be that a club has some face-to-face sessions and some online sessions. So they're a hybrid club in that essence. The question 2 is that the main point that geographic distancing will not ruin club spirit. Clubs created during the pandemic, Adam Weisberg has created one such club, a virtual club, is working over a long distance, and club spirit is created in that club. Question 3 was that enablers are important. People who did on face-to-face organizing a bridge do not fancy doing it online, so we need to have enablers that can help them to do that online. It is all very important to keep and nourish our volunteers, and we have also seen that most of our members have embraced learning new technologies. And also for the last point, it is very important to have committed enablers. I think that was the main points from the discussion.
Thank you, Espen. That was very comprehensive. Can I invite the spokesperson from the second group? To speak?
So which was the second group, Miriam?
Sorry. I think that's helpful, isn't it? When I've got them all in my head as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
It's Tournament Bridge is next. Tournament Bridge, which is Peter Cox.
Peter. Thank you, Sam.
Okay, I think is the future of Tournament Bridge digital was the first question. Obviously, there's a variety of opinions on this. And I think one of the aspects that came out of it that we hadn't had a chance to discuss earlier was that the economics, as I think Espen just mentioned a moment ago, the economics of running tournaments when you have to hire a convention centre or a hotel or whatever it is, and then you have greatly reduced tables, makes the economic viability of the Congress difficult. And that's been a problem for some of us in Australia. Are tablets going to replace cards at tournaments? Well, that again split people on the thing, and question really is whether the technology and what it's going to allow. Some people said they take their own bidding boxes with them to tournaments. Can we use the sit-out seat to use tablets? And people were yes and no on that. So nothing very firm. I think we're a little distance off knowing the answer to whether tablets are going to be the future. And if there is some sort of digital hybrid, how will that be managed, supervised and played? Look, I think the idea that there's supervision appeals to a lot of people because people do have concern about the cheating factor. The important thing about the supervisor is that it's like supervising school exams. You don't have to be an expert on bridge. Your main role there is to make sure they're not using their mobile phones to be able to sending each other messages or talking to each other. They're not looking at a second screen, those sorts of things. So, you don't need a champion bridge player to be doing that in the locations. So they were the main sort of aspects that we picked up from it.
Thank you very much. Can I call on the group that was discussing the etiquette of online bridge to give some feedback?
I just want to bring out two points that sort of permeated the discussion we had rather than work through the questions. And one was a very positive thing in that the atmosphere in the online bridge is a lot less intimidating than it is at a bridge club. So there's something about you don't have that sense of formality, and you don't have that worry about the fact that when things go slowly on my internet, somebody's going to jump on me and call the director and ask for a ruling. So there's that makes it much more relaxed, and that has a very positive effect because it lets the lesser players, the newcomers, players of lower ability, it lets them mix much more easily with the more competitive community. So that's a very good thing for the game, the fact that the communities can mix much more because of a more, maybe it's invisible or relaxed etiquette. And when you come to it from the other side, and this is more of maybe a negative, something we've got to pick up on, the competitive players do get a bit frustrated at times, and they get frustrated because they don't have the same knowledge, understanding of who they're playing against and what their system and behaviours are and what their conventions are and what their leads and signals are. There is something that we missed the boat, I think, in the rush to get going online, in educating people as to what good behaviour was online, how important it is to make the opponents aware of your style of bridge and what you're doing. The sort of, the support of full disclosure online is done in a different way than it is in a face-to-face game. But we haven't really put the effort into to making everybody aware of that and fully up to speed on that. So that's something that we could actually pick up on. But again, it's a different etiquette that, say, has still to be learned. Those were the 2 points.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Can I call on the spokesperson for pandemic organisations, please, to give some feedback on what they thought the key points were from their discussion? I can see from the chat that some of you were unable to speak or engage in your group, and we do apologise for that. This is a new kind of format of group discussion, so it was perhaps inevitable that in these technologically interesting times that would happen, but apologies. Pandemic organisations?
Yeah, I fear we didn't appoint a spokesperson, so I think you have to put up with me for the moment.
That's fine,
we talked about the role of NBOs in the enforced transition to online, and of course it was quite fraught with the urgency of creating online environments for bridge clubs, and also clubs struggling and sometimes even feeling that the NBO was competing with them as they were trying to get players online. Quite a complicated situation. We talked about the need for a change of focus in NBOs as social bridge becomes more important versus competitive bridge, though both remain important. We talked about training of directors, the fact that some directors going back to face-to-face bridge will need a refresher perhaps as they've not been directing bridge for a long time. We talked about training in hybrid bridge and that being a thing that clubs may need help with. We talked about clubs with financial issues, having paid rent perhaps for premises that they weren't able to use without any income, and how NBOs may be able to assist or advise on that. We talked about teachers and that we need to make sure there's a flow of new teachers to bring people into the game. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a firm believer that online has got advantages for teachers and for bringing new players into clubs. So that is very, very important. And there's probably things I've missed, but
you seem to have covered a lot.
those were some of the things we talked about.
Thank you very much, Tim. That's great. And if anybody from those groups that were unable to talk for whatever reason would like to now give some comments or thoughts in chat, that would be great, because we will have a few minutes to get some questions from attendees. So do see this as an opportunity. If you were unable to give your opinion on the topic, please do that in the chat. Can I now ask the group that was discussing locating the missing bridge players, something we talked about briefly in the panel, if there was a spokesperson, or if not, the workshop facilitator, if they could just give a few thoughts on where the missing bridge players are and how to locate them.
Okay, thanks, Miriam. I'll start, and then if Kath or Tim Rees want to chip in afterwards, that's fine. But our focus was very much on what somebody aptly described as techno fear. And it just seemed that the technology has been such a barrier for people. And we heard some great stories of people who've overcome that barrier with innovative teaching methods. But it was still a fact of life that there have been some people who've been excluded because the technology is just too much for them. And so the feeling is that once we can move away from the technology and have our face-to-face sessions back, a lot of those people will come back to the table, as it were. So, Kath, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah. The other things people thought meant we lost bridge player was the lack of social interaction, and especially where they were playing on video-based platforms. So, if the main purpose behind people playing bridge was for friendship, then we lost people through that. We lost a lot of good players potentially because of the fear of cheating. The more social players and club players weren't so worried about that, but we did lose good players because of teaching. And I think also there was some comments on naturally replacing things. If teaching was good, then we were naturally replacing players. But if teaching in an area hadn't sort of got to grips with COVID, then we were losing players sort of naturally. I think that was the main things I popped down. Tim, was there anything?
Yep, Tim, would you like to chip in anything?
You might not be able to speak. Fred, it's Tim Rees. Tim Rees, Fred, are you there? Can you unmute him?
He's muted, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
1 second.
Tim Rees.
Yep. Okay, Tim, you can unmute.
Yeah, I mean, we had a discussion about what the missing players were doing. Joan Bennett had produced a spreadsheet from Wallingford. She noticed that the players had gone missing when they went to online, and she contacted all of them and found that most of them were ready to come back, and they're just sitting there waiting for face-to-face to start again. Personally, I found it quite depressing earlier today when there was so much talk about how online was here to stay and it's the future and whatever. We're all talking about the 50% of players who are playing at the moment. We've got over half the players waiting desperately for face-to-face to come back, and that should be the key to all discussions going forward. I was very pleased to see what Jan said earlier, that internationally face-to-face is the way forward.
Thank you, Tim. That's good. That was a very helpful, thoughtful point to make. Can I call on our final group, which was debating whether or not the online can be regarded as an inferior game, which links back to the little Padlet quiz thing that you did for Sam at the beginning. So, do you have a spokesperson from that group? Jordan, are you speaking or are you muted?
He's muted.
Now he's not muted.
Well, thank you, Miriam. And thank you all for such lively discussions in our group on discussing an inferior game. And I'll summarise some of the key points, but I'll also call upon Clifford, Sue and Anne. If you would like to add anything, then please feel free to do so. But in relation to the questions that we had discussed, looking at the first question, perhaps we shouldn't look at online bridge as being inferior. In fact, we problematize this word as inferior. Is this actually suitable? Should we be using this word to describe online bridge? In fact, what we found is that there is a lot of benefits, there's a lot of advantages in the online bridge, especially for thinking about the next generation of players. But in relation to that, there is some caveats, and thinking around the notion of question 4 around concentration, especially with younger players mentioned in one of the other groups. How can we maintain the concentration of players to ensure that they're not distracted in an online environment, and especially with the hybrid era in terms of the technology, the capabilities of technology to ensure that the platforms are capable to ensure a game of bridge that is played in the same format or in a different format for different types of players. In relation to question 3, we didn't, the comments discussed, we didn't really see a differentiation between holding cards and touching a keypad screen. In fact, what we thought was that they should complement one another. So we should be finding ways to make bridge more accessible, and online bridge is one way that we can do that. But in terms of how can we improve online bridge, we turn to face-to-face bridge. So we can look at the ways in which face-to-face bridge, how have we learned from face-to-face bridge, and what can we take? What are the lessons learned from that, and how can we implement them into online bridge? But also recognizing that online bridge has its own caveats, such as what we're going to be discussing later today with cheating incidents. So what aspects of do we have to take into consideration as unique to online bridge? So finally, looking at question 5, the future of bridge, there is promise to digital bridge. We've had very fruitful discussions today in thinking about the prospects of collaborations as what we're doing today with the conference. And I think there's much to be gained from online bridge, but it's certainly there's many challenges and there's a long way to go before we get to a seamless platform that can be accessible for all. So thank you very much for all the contributors in that session.
Thank you. Did Jordan called on a couple of other people in the group? Do either of them, I know you're currently muted, but do either of you want to add anything to that? Just give us a hands up in the chat if you do. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay. We'll assume that it's been beautifully covered. Thank you very much. We're now going to turn to, in the last sort of 14 minutes that we have left, I want to return to our 2 panels and our panelists. And I'd like to ask each panelist to, just having listened to, being part of the discussion groups and heard what has been going on in this very full session, are there any final thoughts or anything that you would like to add about Pandemic Bridge, online, COVID, face-to-face, that you feel, as a kind of closing comment, that would be helpful? So can I start with maybe Peter?
I think the thing we have to face is that bridge was in decline in most countries before COVID came along. So what concerns me is that COVID will be a tipping point. The problem comes back to within the clubs. We offer, in Australia, we offer grants, we offer incentives, and more to the point, offer workshops to teach them how to better run their clubs and how to market their clubs. We have great resistance in getting anybody or many people to take up the offer. It's free. We provide it to them for free. I do it on Zoom, or I can do it face to face. So that is something we'd love to learn an answer to this week, as to how do we motivate the clubs to want to move forward.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Peter. Can I ask Patrick, any final thoughts?
So the one thing I picked up, I guess, is the diversity of experiences and the diversity of opinions about where we want to go. And the one thing I think we have to focus on is moving forward the game of bridge, rather than moving forward face-to-face and moving on the left and moving forward online on the right. We've got to try and move all forward together and use the two to the one to the advantage of the other as often as we can.
Yep.
Thank you, Patrick. That's brilliant. Can I ask Nikki for any thoughts?
Yeah, I just echo what Patrick said in a slightly different way and say, let's not leave anybody behind. It's a big, diverse community, and let's try and build relationships. I think what Peter was just talking about is it's slightly an issue that people who run clubs are a bit independently minded. I was trying to choose my language here. And you have to build up a bit of trust, I think, to accept advice from elsewhere. And I think if we work on building up trust, you'll make those relationships effective, is my suggestion.
Thank you, Nikki. Jan, do you have any thoughts that you would like to share? Jan Cameron? Is he still here? Or has he disappeared.
I think he's muted.
Yeah, Jan, are you muted? Well, while we, oh, there you are, Jan. Hello.
Thank you very much for unmuting me. Maybe that was intentional that you kept me muted. Anyway, I just want to add, unless you think I'm totally against online bridge, that actually the EBL is arranging in August what is probably the most, I don't know what to say, elaborate online event, maybe even ever, since we're having the qualifications for national teams to the World Championships played on a Real Bridge platform. I think it is probably the fourth week of August. And we're playing different setups in different countries. We're going to have neutral observers paid by us traveling. They will be the only ones traveling to hopefully neighboring countries, etc. So we're doing a very elaborate setup. Real Bridge are extremely cooperative, I must say, setting up various things. So it's going to be very interesting to see what this event looks like. It's pretty similar to what they've done in Australia and New Zealand, I'd say. But with a lot more countries, 40-ish countries.
Wow. Well, we've had fun trying to organise, many people from different countries, the time zones for this conference, so that will be fun. Can I ask whether Christina, do you have any thoughts that you want to add from this session?
Well, my lasting impression is that how much we are all really looking forward to playing face to face again, and how much we will appreciate it. We took it for granted before, and then for 18 months we've not been able to do it. I think we will have happy days ahead playing face to face, and maybe a lot of these conversations will seem quite academic in a few months' time, and I hope so. I think the future is face to face and online, and we can enjoy both. Thank you.
Espen, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to add? You're muted, Espen.
It's from the chat, and I think this is a thought experiment for us all. And that is, if bridge organizers were run entirely by teenagers and 20-somethings, how would they shape the bridge world in the ways that we want to play in? I think that's a very, very interesting question. And also for those who say that, in a way, real bridge is face-to-face. As I just put up on the chat, in Norway from this autumn, bridge is going to be taught as an A-level subject. It's being run from one institution, but students from all over the country can take the subject. Of course, it is run online. So there's no doubt that the pandemic have changed the shape of bridge, and it will be a hybrid with face-to-face and online. And none of them are inferior to the other.
Thank you, Espen. Kath, would you have any final thoughts that you would like to add or share with us?
Yeah, I'd just like to, I think in a few years' time when we look back on this period, I wonder if we'll look back on it positively or negatively, and I hope we look back on it positively. I think so many people, especially social players, have found bridge, online bridge, a complete lifesaver in lockdown, and I think it'd be great to build on that enthusiasm.
Thank you. And finally, Tim Anderson, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with us?
I don't think I do. Nothing I haven't already said. So thank you everyone for their contributions. I've been listening intently.
So I think that brings us nearly to the end of our session. I don't know how for the panel, it's been very full, but I think the discussions that we've had have been really quite interesting and engaging and challenging some of these binaries between online and offline, real, not real, and thinking about the different kinds of players and mediums that suit different kinds of players, and this kind of new world or new old world that we're going into in the time of the pandemic and COVID and bridge. So I would just like to give a huge, massive thank you to our panelists for giving up their time and their expertise to share with us. So massive thank you and a round of applause to everyone, to our attendees for spending coming to the discussion groups and participating as and when you could. I am really grateful for those of you who could, and for those of you who also participated so actively and engaged in the chat. That is wonderful. Managing those two things can often be quite difficult, so thank you for that. I would just like to draw all of your attention to the next session. We have an incredibly packed day today. This is by far just the beginning of how it's going to carry on. We have a pairs tournament for Real Bridge happening at 3 o'clock today. Yes, no joke, 3 o'clock today, or 4 o'clock European time, or 10 o'clock in the States. And I'm sorry, I don't know the times in Australia or Japan, but yes, if you still wish to come and sign up for that, you can. Please do so. The link will be in the chat, and you're also able to do that online. And then there will be a Q&A with the Real Bridge developers, who have obviously developed this fantastic platform throughout the pandemic, which so many of you have played on. So please do use that as an opportunity to come along and hear how that all happened. And then this evening, perhaps one of the most contentious sessions that we are going to touch on is that of digital bridge and cheating. And we have a fantastic panel, the Sheriff plus others, to have a discussion about what it means, digital bridge and cheating, and the debates about it. Jan will also be there, so Jan will have to come back again. So you will hear more about from Jan's perspective, plus there will be others as well. So this will prove to be, no doubt, a very exciting and engaging evening. And as attendees, we are inviting you, as usual, to please put any conversations, comments, thoughts about cheating, because I know this is a contentious issue in the bridge world, into the chat when you do come. And then the joys of the conference carry on with Wednesday, where we have gender, age and intergenerationality, and we will be discussing things around sexism in bridge, so the contentious stuff does not stop there. So we would like to encourage as many of you as possible to please carry on and come to these sessions. And otherwise, a little slide on how you can carry on to support us. There's Padlet, where you can literally participate easily and quickly throughout the conference. And there's also the website. Please use social media, retweet, like us. Donate should you wish to, and obviously the conference evaluation form is also the best way that we can ever hear your actual views and opinions. But from on behalf of Sam, myself and the BAMSA team, I just want to thank you all again for your participation, your enthusiasm and your patience with any technical glitches. Thank you very much.